when I clap my hands to sync my cameras or drop my slash pick. So if you have some pentatonic shape knowledge, at least one shape, and I've drawn this way so that you can see why this is our guitarist's favorite shape. The key to this part of this lesson is designed to take advantage of this nut like all the way across all of the strings on one fret that we find in our favorite pentatonic shape. We're going to move this shape from its normal position to a slightly different position, but it'll still feel just as comfortable, and it's going to sound a lot more interesting for a couple of reasons. And you don't need a lot of theory knowledge to really get what I'm going to talk about. You need to know the idea that there are 5 pentatonic shapes. They're movable, and you should really know this first shape that we're going to talk about, the box that everybody gets stuck in. It's like moving to a new home on a familiar road. You have a very similar route you're going to travel, but the overall story about getting to this new home is going to sound different than just using your stock pentatonic shapes in the standard root position. Now, by root position, I have squared the minor root here so you can see that when we think of this nut-like shape, here we are in A, here we are again in E, here we would be in B minor. Those are the minor starting points for this. You have 3 places where you can find that root. Here in A, you would find it on the 5th, 7th, and 5th again of the E, D, and E strings. What I want to focus on is this kind of playing. This kind of playing that moves that way, towards this shape, as opposed to this way, away from this shape, towards the guitar. We're going to use this as our kind of common ground for at least finding placement around the neck in order to apply this quick theory trick. It's a great way to sound a little smarter than you are, and I like to take advantage of that whenever I can. So let's start with this shape and why it's important, and then how we're going to move it. In E, so our E power chord, everybody's favorite, E string open, A string 7th fret, D string 9th fret, and G string 9th fret as well. That gives us an E, the 5th of the E, which is a B, and then an E again. And it's a very common little sound. There's a little loop I have with a little reverb. So that's our basis for this starting point and making this shape major. So we know if we go and use this, we have the minor shape, making this line or this finger nut the 12th fret. If we make this finger nut the 9th fret and then use this circle here as our starting point, that gives us these circles on the E string 12th fret, on the G string 9th fret, and then again on the high E string 12th fret. So that gives you a place to kind of find your major home bass. So this, a lot of people will just kind of say, okay, well, that's Ionian, and I don't really want to explore that too much. It sounds so normal, and I want to, how do I take major scales or major shapes and make them sound a little more interesting? And this little trick will help you do that. Instead of starting our E major pentatonic shape on the 12th fret, let's take that pentatonic shape and move it down to the B, which is found on the E string of the at the 7th fret of the E string. So that gives us a B major, but let's do that over that E major for a minute. So you see, that sounds different than playing that exact same lick here. Doing both. So why does that work, and why does that all of a sudden sound kind of lifty and kind of floaty? Well, the whole idea of what we're doing is taking a pentatonic shape which is 5 notes, and we're putting it over really a chord. The chord itself has only 2 notes. It doesn't have a major third or a minor third, but I'm implying this major third by playing this G sharp, which is found in that B scale, and it's also found here in your E major scale. So what have I just done there? I've taken, where'd my pen go? Dave goes to find his pen. Slash pick. So we've taken the E major pentatonic, which is E major. E major pentatonic is going to have 5 notes. Penta. So we're going to have E, which is our root. Then we're going to go up a half step. Up a whole step. It's hard to do that with the pen cap in your hand. Up a whole step from E to F sharp. And then F sharp to G sharp. That's our major third right there. And this is our starting point here. So that in this E major pentatonic, I can't write like that, implies the major third, which gives us that shape. And then we jump right over to the B, which is the 5th. And then from the B, so let's see here. B there, C sharp there, we get the major 6th. So there we have the roots, the 2nd, the major 3rd, the 5th, and the major 6th. So when we go to B major pentatonic, we're going to apply that same formula. We're going to go B, and then up to the major 2nd, a whole step, which is going to be C sharp, which is not in, oh yeah, there it is right there. That's the 6th. You see here, that's a common note. That B to B, that's a common note. So those are safe. Those are really safe notes. So then we're also then going to go another major 2nd from C sharp to D sharp, which is not in here. It's not in your major pentatonic. So we have opened up something that's not in that shape. And then you go major 3rd up to your 5th. So the 5th of that is F sharp, which is common, comes in right there. And then another whole step from there to get a major 6 is going to be your G sharp, common notes. So what does that tell us? We can now freely move about the cabin while dropping our pens. We can freely move about these 2 shapes. So if we were to go up the E major shape and then down the B major shape, gives us a little bit of expression and a chance to play a different note, a different layout, a different shape, but also feel familiar. So as you start to learn pentatonic shapes and learn the other ones from there, the first one that comes to my mind in this lesson would be the next shape that way. So if we're here in B, well, let's do it here in E. If we're here in E, it gives me just a little room. So right here, there's my B, the fifth of it again, and here's my E. The next shape that I think of that has this straight across it, if you have this movable nut, which we find in this shape now, let's move it to here for a second and look, continue to look that way. But from this, we have our E here. So this shape gives us the root, the second again, the major second, major third, the fifth, and then the major sixth. So you see, it's that same shape, just kind of starting here, and then, which means you can do this. Here on the 7th fret of the A string, just repeat that shape, and that gives you your major, another major shape. It doesn't have this straight line, but I'm going to show you the little trick to remembering that. So let's piece these together. You have your little straight line, and then you have an almost straight line here. It just breaks up. It's like a Tetris piece. It breaks up for 2 strings and then goes back down. So that in E major, that shape, that shape gives us a little room to slide in and out of. And then kind of transfer to that B major shape. So it's a pretty helpful little, it's a pretty helpful, you see how that changes right there, but we know we have this E shape here. So we can jump, when we're in this B major shape, we can add E anywhere, as long as we're kind of doing this E power chord, we can add this E to these shapes, and that gives us the superimposition of the familiar box feel. So we have this shape, we have that shape. Imagine that that was the G sharp, and this is your B still. And we now know that we can go between B major pentatonic and E major pentatonics. And in order to kind of stay in position, but hint at both of those, we could now superimpose this shape in with this next shape, which is, and then we have to allow for the B string. On the B string, we go up to the 5th fret. So here we're kind of doing this shape. We got another straight line going on here. So this is right here. And let's imagine that this is a straight line here. Imagine we have another kind of a movable nut like we did here. It's going to do one thing at the B string. It's going to shift up, and then it's going to go to the 7th fret again. So you see that gives us E and the 2nd and the major 3rd and the 5th. And then we can see there's out of tune. Dave's going to tune. Tuned, heater off. We have B major, B major pentatonic, and we have this E major shape that we're making up from this part of that scale and adjusting our solid line just one time. We're going to go. So we can mix those together when we're over this E chord and really hint at the E, or we can leave it out. See how leaving it out gives a little sense of unresolved over this E. We know we can play E major pentatonic, and we can play B major pentatonic. So if we just kind of stick to this B major pentatonic, we're leaving out the E, which is the tonic, which is already implied 3 times in the power chord, so we're totally safe leaving that out. We have a new way to play a familiar shape and leave out that tonic, but then we can also start to add E major pentatonic in by doing any of the other E major pentatonic shapes that are found within this area, or moving out to comfortable territory if you are already pretty familiar with thinking of this shape in a major way. Most people think of this as the minor shape, and it's a great way to have this tool as a new expressive voice. It doesn't sound minor, but all of the familiar fingerings are there. And on top of it, we can now make it not sound Ionian. We can just make it sound major by starting the pentatonic scale on the 5th of the power chord we're playing. So I would like to get a little more mileage out of this so that it doesn't just sound like I'm playing the same 5 or 6 notes. I want to be able to kind of use it. And how would I do that? See? Same leg. So let's stick in a B major shape here and start to add in this E, these 2 E's here, and we can bring this in a little bit more. That G sharp, you know. There's that, and then you have this. So what did I just do there? I added an A sharp. That's not in here. That is the raised 4th, and that really hits the nail into the coffin of it being Lydian. If you followed any of my phone numbers series where I was translating the phone number lesson, the modal phone number from a guitar magazine, that's the 4 starting position. So if you think of it in 3 notes per string, instead of E major, we're going E Lydian. And it has an A sharp in it. Let me get that delay and stuff off here. So it has that A sharp, and it's nice. It takes us away from this one and this typical story that so many people have heard of, and instead it gives us that is the key note, that raised fourth, that tritone off of the root. It's hard for me to think of tritone as a happy, uplifting thing, because I generally think of it as that Black Sabbath lowered fifth, but this would be the raised fourth, and it's the same interval. So that takes this whole E major and kind of, instead of, like, if you wanted to raise the fourth that way, by adding an A here at the 10th fret on your B, you would raise the fourth this way. And it's a really interesting and a dissonant-y but pleasing kind of a interval. And when used right and exploited right, it can really sound really nice, you know. So it just has a really nice space. And we can explore that by now adding in where we want freely. Once you get really familiar when you get familiar with moving between just small portions of the B and the E major shape, you start to see where there's no A, where this gap happens after your E. You got your E. Here we are connecting the pentatonics. So there's an A and an A sharp. We got neither one of them defined. So there it is. And I kind of avoid it here on the lower string, unless I'm going down. Just kind of sum it up like that. So you can now use your E major and B major pentatonic shapes and comfortably start to add that A sharp. Here in the B major, the first place you really kind of find it usable is on the B string at the 11th fret. And then, see, there's your E to C sharp move. You can imply that major seventh. So that's a really cool way to use Lydian and kind of just start to hint at it, explore it, without having to learn every aspect of Lydian all over the neck. It's a quick way to access a new pentatonic position over a familiar chord, use those shapes, and then start to add in one or two notes specifically from the E major pentatonic scale or from the E Lydian scale, and you're able to make that chord sound pretty interesting. Especially if you're just kind of jamming on your own and you're just kind of looping something like I was doing there, you can start to really imply something a little different than just regular movement. I like to do that, to treat that 4 concept as the 1 and then move to A for a couple of bars. And now you're saying, but you're implying this Lydian sound, but it works. It's really strange how it works. And we then are kind of thinking back to E as Ionian and the A as the new Lydian. We're able to use, again, familiar shapes, but then it takes this level of Lydian sound and applies it to even another layer of the sound. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I also laid an A chord down. It's a little jarring if you hear it on its own after the E, but if you can hint at everything that's kind of floating around. And then when that A lands, move comfortably within these shapes still and accent the A, or move to A major and do this same trick. Build your A major shapes, but with the fifth of that pentatonic shape. So that fifth would be the E, and here we are right here. We're making that E pentatonic usable over this E and A shape, even though we're also hinting at A sharp and taking advantage of it that way. And then we can go to A and use it as Lydian and raise that fourth with that D sharp in there and use the familiar tricks that we just went through here all over that. So it's a really cool way to just take kind of your looping from one place to another, but stay in kind of a really neat floaty zone. And I'm just going to start off in the E, and when I move to A major, you'll see I'll hit a button and things will change, the sound will change. I've already recorded that.